Hi, my name is Clark Bossert. I'm the Director of Business Development here at Canary, and for those of you that were not able to attend our live webinar with Jim Gavigan, we've made the entire conversation available right here in its unedited format. We covered a lot of ground in our conversation, so we've broken the video into a few chapters as you can see below. Jim has decades of industrial experience that he brings to his role as founder and president of Industrial Insight, so we hope that you really enjoy this discussion as we dive deeper into some of Jim's background, his approach to digital transformation projects, and his opinions on some of the latest technology trends. Well, hi, my name is Clark Bossert. I'm here with Jim Gavigan from Industrial Insight, and I'd like to say thanks a ton for joining us for this webinar. It's entitled Turning Your Data into Action, Industrial Insights for Enhanced Productivity. So, Jim, thanks for joining. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me. Been looking forward to this.
Awesome. Well, we've been looking forward to it for quite a while. Jim, you've been a friend of Canary, and you've known, my colleagues here at Canary for quite a while, but you've got a wealth of experience. So I'd like to ask, just as a starting point, would you just tell us some of your background personally?
Yeah, I'll try to do the Cliff Notes version of it so that I don't bore people to death. But I've been in the industry for almost 30 years now, which is kind of hard to imagine. It means I'm getting old, is what it means. But I actually started out doing vibration analysis, my very, very first job. A couple years after college, economy sucked at the time. So I did vibration analysis for like 3 months, and then I got into controls engineering. Worked for a small integrator that did their own, or really a small distributor that did their own integration work. Did that for 6 years, managed the group the last year and a half or so. And I mean, I looked at everything from designing a control panel, building control panels, programming PLCs, install startups, everything, literally like stem to stern, troubleshooting, getting called out, service calls at all hours, all those kind of things. So they threw a lot at me. I probably gained 15 years of experience in those 6 years. Decided to get out of the engineering space because I was tired of the weekend holiday, duty a lot. And so got into sales engineering at Rockwell Automation. Did that and did a technical consulting role there. So I was on the sales side, but more of a technical person. I was there for 6 years. If you're finding a common theme here, 6 years seems to be a magic number for me. And then when I left Rockwell, I went to a system integrator out of Memphis, which is where I lived at the time, called Logical Systems. I was supposedly their sales and business development guy. But I also put on the technical hat fairly frequently. And that's where I got into this whole data historian space. We were doing some work with the PI system with one of our customers at the time. And, we basically helped them tighten up a batch process in about a week. And we've been fighting this problem for like a year. It helped them land a new customer. And they came to us and said, hey, you guys are going to help us build this new plant. And we're not even bidding it out. You guys know our process. You know what we're trying to do. You're our people. And I remember thinking to myself, this whole data thing, and that's even what I called it in my head because I didn't know what to call it, just made two companies millions of dollars. And there's something to it. And a couple years later, got recruited to OSI Soft, was a sales engineer for them for 2 years. That's what ended up moving me down here to St. Augustine, Florida, to take a strategic account manager role. Had 3 bosses in 2 years. The last one and I didn't get along very well. So I got on the we're going to fire you plan that they call a performance improvement plan. Just decided that wasn't going to be for me. Went back to LSI, started their practice around manufacturing intelligence, and then realized I really needed to do something on my own because I felt like I had some unique ideas that were going to be really tough to do in a larger, more traditional integration company. And so I started Industrial Insight in December of 2016. So this has actually been the longest running job that I've ever had. It seems like it was like 6 years at the first company, 6 years at Rockwell, 6 years at LSI. And then it kind of went haywire from there. So I've been here almost 7.5 now. So evidently this is the one that's going to stick. I figured out what I'm going to be when I grow up.
Yeah.
So that's my background. And so really, like I focus, and I know we're going to kind of talk about Industrial Insights. So I think now is probably the appropriate time. What we really focus on is manufacturing and plant floor data. Most of it is coming from data historians, our legacy has been, because of my background, has been around the PI system. I think we got introduced to you guys like 4 or 5 years ago and have been talking
Hmm.
ever since. We have a tremendous respect for what you guys have done and are doing. And we knew down the road we were going to need other options, right? Not every product fits everyone. Not everyone wanted to buy Rockwell
Hmm.
Automation products, or certain other brands, Siemens or whatever, right? So you have to have options. And but we focus on the data historian space. It is kind of the base level that we start at. And literally from install it, upgrades, administration, all that kind of stuff. But what we really like to do is figure out how to help our customers better use the data, building analytics, building events,
Hmm.
building nice dashboards and whatever visualization tool that the historian comes with. Then we get up into business intelligence like Power BI and Tableau. We've got a partnership with Sartorius Steedham, which makes Simca for multivariate analysis. And we played around with some other machine learning platforms like our friends over at Lytix. There's a couple of them that we played with. We really like what Seek's doing.
Hmm.
So we definitely think there's some more play in that space. Um, but I think we're becoming a little bit more, brand agnostic as we go on,
Hmm.
because there's a wider world out there.
Hmm.
And what we're seeing is that the market's changing, so we have to adapt to
Hmm.
that. So anyway, that's a little background on me and us, but we really focus on that, time series and plant floor data. And even, we merged it some with, maintenance and financial data too at times. We're starting to get more and more into that at the Power BI layer. So
Yeah. That's awesome. And if you couldn't tell already, I think that the nut to crack and the hot topic and the theme is basically all around using data because, of course, data is becoming more prolific. It's everywhere. Everything is connected. It's all publishing data. There's smart devices all over the place. And
mhm,
so I think, folks are struggling now with like, first of all, where do I put it? And then how do I actually get real value out of it? And then how do I optimize my process? Um, Two other topics I'll come on to later was just about like democratizing data and then being open because you said there's a lot of different bits of technology that are used across the tech stack for different companies. So I want to get your opinion on that. But
mhm.
with your integration firm, you take a bit of a different approach, which I think is really cool. So oftentimes you might have an integrator that scopes a project, and then they just bill out some hours, and they do a very cookie cutter, kind of like by the book method.
Yep.
But you have a different approach, and so I
Mhm.
want you to kind of unpack that and why it's advantageous. What are the pitfalls that it avoids? What are the benefits that it brings? And why do you feel like that's really the best fit? Just because digital transformation is taking place all over the place, um, across different levels of digital maturity for different organizations, and so you're able to come in and you can kind of meet people where they're at. So, would you just mind unpacking? How is your strategy as a firm? How is it a little bit different?
Yeah, I appreciate you asking that. And I appreciate you noticing that it's different. I like to think we take a different approach. Not everyone notices or appreciates that. So thank you. Yeah, one of the things that I, found in like say a traditional integration firm is to bid a project, it's like, okay, what is the exact scope? What's the schedule of it? Right? How many of
Hmm.
these do you want? How many of those do you need? All of those kind of things. Then we can estimate what we think it's going to take, parts, labor, all
Hmm.
that, right? And we're going to deliver exactly that. And even in the space we work in, very often what we see is a lot of the integration firms that customers work with will do exactly what you tell them, nothing more, nothing less. And maybe it's a risk thing. I don't really know,
Hmm.
but I think it's more a culture thing.
Hmm.
Um, and that was kind of my issue and why I kind of wanted to start out on my own is I felt like, I was getting questions like, okay, well, what's the schedule?
Hmm.
Well, we're trying to do something they've never done before. I don't know.
Hmm.
I'm not sure how long it's going to take to do something we've never done before.
Yeah.
Well, what's the scope? Well, again, they've never done
Hmm.
this before. They need to run better in this area of the plant. They have 20 years worth of data and they don't know how to use it.
Yeah.
I'm not sure. And so what I really found was we really need to take an approach of we need to meet customers where they're at, figure out what they really need, what is the capability that they're actually asking for,
Yeah.
and then run from there. And I'm just finishing up a project. I was just kind of messing around with it a little bit before we got started, but it was for a paper company, batch digesters, right? You're trying to
Hmm.
optimize them. They had a problem where they did what's called they blew a hard cook, which means the digester is a big pressure cooker, right? So they put
Hmm.
wood chips in it, put cooking liquor in it, add steam and pressure, for heat. And after a couple hours, it basically cooks down to the consistency of oatmeal, and then that's the beginning of that pulping process. And then they do things from
Hmm.
there, wash it, take out the knots, bleach it potentially, all those kind of things, right? Well, they blew a hard cook, which means we put all the wood chips in, but we didn't put all the cooking liquor in. So therefore, they didn't get the consistency they need. They blew it over
Hmm.
to the next process, and they
Hmm.
started plugging everything up.
Yikes.
Because you have, instead of the consistency of oatmeal, you have the consistency of wet wood chips.
Yeah.
And so they're like, we don't want to do that anymore. So I literally got a message from one of them that, hey, we need your help. And they sent me we had like a 45-minute conversation. They sent me a Word document that literally had two sentences and a screen of a whiteboard of here are all the metrics we want to track.
Hmm.
And then a chart that they had built and pasted in with two more sentences, and this is the kind of report we want.
Yeah.
And this was like probably mid-February, and they said we
Hmm.
want the first one done by the first Friday of March. It was like the
Hmm.
fourth or something, whatever it was. And then we want the other one done by oh no, it was like no, it was even sooner than that. I think we were about around the 1st of February. It was like middle of February for the first one, 1st of March for the second one. So
Hmm.
basically 4 weeks from when we were talking, I had two sentences and a screenshot and a pasted in table. Go.
Yeah.
Make something pretty for us.
Hmm.
And so a lot of integrators would have been like, okay, well, we'll give you a time and material, you know, potentially not to exceed, maybe not, you know,
Hmm.
and yeah, we can get started, but you're gonna have to tell
Yeah.
us exactly what you want.
Hmm.
So I took a different approach. I just said, okay, well, I have some ideas of what I think they need, and I happen to know this mill. I've been in it before, and I work with batch digesters, so and they knew I had some idea.
Hmm.
None of us knew what it was going to look like, and so I gave them a fixed price cost later that day,
Hmm.
and that was on a Friday afternoon. Monday morning, 7:30, 8 o'clock, I got a email that said, "Hey, this is a go. We'll get you a PO in a
Hmm.
couple days. Go ahead and get started."
Hmm.
And so I drew out some things like on PowerPoint, like conceptually, this is kind of what I'm thinking. What do you think? And because if you're
Yeah.
good with this is kind of what I'm going to work toward.
Yeah.
And so we're about to wrap it up now. I had one of my guys help me with that. And I think a lot of integrators certainly wouldn't have taken a fixed price. Two,
Hmm.
may not have even taken it because they don't know scope and schedule.
Yeah. And
And
it takes a lot of judgment, probably, and experience to be able to even give a
it
fixed price. So
it
that's
it
not an
does.
easy task.
It's not, and I'm not saying we give fixed prices all the time because there are some things where like, well, none of us know. Like we haven't ever worked with you
Hmm.
before, so you want us to get started. We don't really
Hmm.
know how this is going to go. So yeah, we do some hourly work too because there are times it just makes sense, right?
Hmm.
In this particular case, you had to take this. Well, I see what they want. It can only be so hard. There's
Hmm.
only so much you can do with what they've given me, right?
Hmm.
And so yes, it does take a little experience to do that. We also will do some retainer agreements. We have a retainer agreement, and I've tried to get other customers to sign up with it, um, because we have a chemical plant that has, I think it's 5 different areas, functional areas. There's probably a couple dozen people that we interact with. And what I didn't want to manage was, oh, Fred needs you guys for an hour. Sally's
Hmm.
got, a couple day project. George over here needs you for about 30 minutes. Like,
Sure.
okay, I need a PO for an hour, I need a PO for 30 minutes, I need a PO for a couple of days. Then I've got to
Yeah.
manage. Okay, are we done? Did we finish that? I
Hmm.
didn't want to manage a ton of paperwork. And so we meet with them pretty regularly and we have a kind of a running list of things we're trying to do with them.
Hmm.
And so we'll take that approach too. We've tried to get other customers to sign up for it and they're a little scared of it. It's
Hmm.
like, yeah, we'll do retainer agreements for like accountants and lawyers. We're not sure we want to do it with you because we don't
Yeah.
know if we're going to leverage it or if we're going to use it. But
Yeah.
excuse me, I think it can be extremely effective.
Hmm. I'll go ahead and
Excuse me.
interject something. So just as you've been talking about your approach and how you approach these projects and engage with these companies, I think there's a reason why they call it digital transformation and not digital incremental progress. Because basically, you were saying, I think that companies, when they go to look at, what can be done for us, what tools and technologies are available that could really drive us forward and optimize our process, I think, in shopping for how can we improve, maybe they benchmark against another company and say, well, this is the best that we've ever seen it done. I think they're trying to decide on, really what can be the scope, and then there's huge business implications for that as well. Of course, you can
Mhm.
you can collect data from all of these devices, and you can put it in a dashboard or in a product. But then, how do you see, that revolution in terms of technology cascading into all of the business implications, because that's just a lot to navigate. It really is transformative. It's not just, an incremental step down the same path. It's kind of like, a juncture and you're going in a new trajectory.
Yeah.
Which is why I think it's cool to have that ambiguity baked in to where you can, have an advisory role, of course, being, technical expert, but then just the advisory role on like, this is the overall impact that these products could have, and really scoping like, given your hardware, your software, given your the people that you have working and their levels of expertise, of course, with the changing of the guard too, with retiring folks and younger people, there's so much there. That's a huge conversation. That's a big conversation to unpack in and of itself. If you want to just add one more comment on that, it's just a
Just
large
one?
topic.
Yeah, just one. I could talk about this for a little while. Like one of the big things that I try to focus on, and I think everyone who's listening now or later really needs to think about, is look around your company and your manufacturing facilities. You have gray hair retiring. There's probably a ton of most of your expertise probably is within 5 years of retirement, if not already retired. What
Hmm.
you have coming up is people with less experience who aren't looking for a 20 or 30-year career job in basically the same position, like the
Hmm.
people that they may be replacing. If you look, just listen to like my history, right? I jumped around a fair amount.
Hmm.
We if we see like the millennial generation and Gen Z, they don't stick around very long at companies. They want to experience different things. And this is not a poke in the eye because like everybody that works for me
Hmm.
right now is a millennial. So I personally love their generation. I love that generation. But yeah, what they're looking for, is experiences, is a, life balance. That gosh, that's one I could go on for a while about too. I literally I'm recruiting someone now who
Hmm.
literally she and her husband just had a baby and she's sick of, okay, I'm planning on going home at 5. Something happens at the plant. She doesn't get home until 10. So, well, there's
Yeah.
another night I don't get to put my kid to bed.
Yeah.
This is happening. People literally are leaving manufacturing because of it. And this is going to be a problem. And so
Hmm.
we have a generation that is moving around a lot. That's what we're replacing people who've been at our facilities for 20 and 30 years with.
Yeah.
If you don't make some of these changes, you're dead.
Hmm.
And even if you do make some of these changes, you have to have the change management in place where people will actually go use them.
Hmm.
We One of the lessons we have learned the hard way is if you don't get people like the tool that I was just describing for the batch digesters, literally when they came back up out of their outage, it was in the control room. Was it perfect yet? No. We were
Hmm.
still working through bugs, but they were
Hmm.
using it and they were telling me, here's where the bugs are.
Hmm.
And a lot of the bugs happen to do with data quality, which I know we'll end up talking about sometime during this. But um, that has to happen. Like you have to have people that are willing to embrace that and not say, well, I have my Excel spreadsheet that tells me
Yeah.
everything I would ever know. Well, that's only for you.
Yeah.
And you're the only one that knows how it all works.
Hmm.
And so what happens if you get hit by the bus tomorrow and you're not here anymore? No
Yeah.
one knows what you know.
And yeah, that's the risk that nobody takes comfort in. Nobody wants that. Of course, those individuals
And
often add
it's
tremendous value, but it's risky.
they do, and there's a ton of them still around because
Hmm.
that's the way it used to be, right?
Hmm.
And it's slowly dying out. And so yeah, it's incremental steps to a transformative change.
Hmm.
And if anybody really wants to hear someone who really has some deep knowledge of this, on our YouTube channel, there's some conversations I had with Lance Fountain.
Hmm.
He worked with me at OSI Soft, but he's worked for Alcoa, he's worked for Cargill, and now he's over at Rockwell Automation advising companies on their digital transformation efforts. He's got some great thoughts about the transformation process from the business side, right? I'm
Yeah.
more of a kind of a technocrat. I mean, obviously I do some consulting and can talk about some of these topics, but
Hmm.
he really approaches it from the business side because that's
Hmm.
where his experience lies. If you really want to hear something like that, because we don't talk about product or like which tech
Yeah.
stack, like this was a very generic conversation of how do you need to think about it, and
Yeah.
I learned a lot from it. But change management is like the really big deal in all of it.
Hmm.
Another example in that space, I literally built something that is now used at a site that literally most years saves them millions of dollars. It's just a
Hmm.
simple dashboard that's a weighted calculation that predicts when a certain problem is going to happen
Hmm.
based on metrics that they know. I work with one of their 30-year folks. He said, these are the things that are killing us. We validated it with the data. We built a solution, and I built a dashboard so that they can see it coming.
Hmm.
When I went back to the site a couple months later, the old dashboard that was just a bunch of trends
Hmm.
that you had to really interpret and try to figure out what is all this telling me was on
Hmm.
their big display. And I'm like, I looked at the engineer, I'm like, Leslie.
Yeah.
And in talking with the operator, they're like, well, we don't know where that number comes from because I put like,
Uh-huh.
here's the percent chance you have of this problem happening. They're like, we don't
Yeah.
understand that. And some of the trends aren't big enough. We can't see them.
Yeah.
So we
Yeah.
started redesigning it there. I was like, you see how easy this is. And I looked at Leslie and I
Hmm.
said, I want you to come in here and work with them so that this is
Hmm.
something for them, not for me and you. Like
Hmm.
they need a tool. And I want the next time I come in here for them to be using it. And sure enough, it was. They went through that process and it
Yeah.
was good because I learned how important change management is. So yeah, this whole
Hmm.
digital transformation is the goal should be how are we going to take 2, 3, 5 year employees or younger and
Hmm.
have them at least get close to the knowledge and output of these 20 and 30-year employees that we're losing? How can we at least give them
Yeah.
a fighting chance?
Yeah.
That's really the goal, right? And we have to give them not only the fighting chance, but also help them understand why they should use those tools. And hey, I tell customers all the time, if I don't hear from you after I finish, or
Hmm.
after I put a draft of something out there, or one of our people does it, if we don't hear from you, our assumption is you're not using it and you just
Hmm.
wasted your money. And that's happened
Yeah.
to us a bunch because
Hmm.
the company, one person was ready and they tried to influence, but nobody
Hmm.
else was ready.
Yeah.
So anyway, I could go on for a long time, but those are some of the things that we've noticed big time.
Yeah, that's good. And that readiness conversation, I think, is important because, of course, you're putting work into it and you take pride in that work and you want people to get the most out of their data. But
100%.
it's, it could be easier said than done. So I want to talk about, starting points and, a problem that's well defined is half solved. And so I really want to, from your perspective, like talk about what is the right starting point for a company, because on your website you love it when people have mountains of data and they've got tons of problems.
and then you can, come right in there. So, also to the, I know that clean data is a part of it. So you don't want data that's the consistency of oatmeal, proverbially, as you mentioned earlier with, the pulp and paper situation that went wrong. So tell us, like, what is the right starting point for a customer that's like, I need a change. I don't even know exactly where. I just know it needs to happen. What's something they can do to prep?
Well, it varies, because you have some companies that literally don't really have any real-time data or access to it.
Mm-hmm.
And so therefore, where you start with them is we've got to get some data and
Yeah.
get you some first, like even 0.5 principal dashboards up so that you can see what's
Mm-hmm.
going on in your company and that more people can get their eyes on it so you can see what's happening versus somebody like that paper company who had 20 or 25 years worth of data and they're like, we just blew a hard cook. And like, how does that happen? Like, we have all kinds of data. We have people looking at it,
Mm-hmm.
but it's not telling us what we need to know.
Yeah.
So it's different, right? And we try to meet people where they're at, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is it just getting some basic data collection and getting started on the journey? And that was a
Mm-hmm.
conversation we had with Sean and your team yesterday with a customer who is going to be on that journey. They don't have anything yet.
Mm-hmm.
The guy that I introduced to you guys had worked with us and with other tools in the past, and I said, this could be a really great fit for you. And where we start with him and his organization is drastically different than the paper company who has 25 years worth of data. What most of our clientele already has data and they have a lot of it and they don't know what to do with it. So
Mm-hmm.
what I typically and why I use the mountains of problems and mountains of data, analogy is tell me about your problems that you're having.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me what you're trying to do to solve these problems. And then I have enough experience to say, okay, let's go pick one that I think we can solve in like 4 to 6 weeks, or at least make a big dent in it.
Mm-hmm.
So you're talking, 30, 40, $50,000 with us, but it's like a $500,000 a year or more problem with you. So even if you spend twice as much with us, you spend 100 grand with us and you get, 175 grand worth of benefit, you're still like, I can deal with that payback.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Or $250,000 worth of payback, whatever it is, right?
Yeah.
There's still a cost benefit, right?
Yeah.
I think that's a usual starting place. And I always tell people, well, let's go focus in on something really narrow, but go very deep in the technology stack. So like if we're working with our pie customers, right? A lot of times that's okay, let's build an asset framework structure out. Let's build events, let's use Pi Vision, but also let's think about maybe some Power BI. Let's pull some data from somewhere else and marry it with some of the things we're looking at. Maybe we look at it with some multivariate analysis too. But let's
Mm-hmm.
go really narrow on the problem but very deep in the technology stack, because then you can kind of figure out like what works and what doesn't, what applies where and what doesn't.
Mm-hmm.
Because then you get a much broader picture of the possibility and capability if you put it all together.
Yeah.
Then it starts to become apparent, oh, we can use this technique over there. Oh, and now we can solve
Mm-hmm.
that problem over there that we never thought we could do. And so it really starts to open them up to how to think about the problem, right?
Mm-hmm.
And like for your customers, it's kind of the same thing. If you're just traditionally using tags and trends and process graphics,
Mm-hmm.
how do we start using the asset structure and the calculation engine and building, templatized, displays that can change context when things change in the process, right? So it tells you what's going wrong. Instead of you having to look at everything and interpret it, how can we get to where we tell you what's wrong and what to do? So
Mm-hmm.
that way, immediately, like, oh, that's wrong. Here's what I need to go do. All right, let's go get
Yeah.
that fixed. Whereas if you just throw a bunch of trends on a screen, you're assuming that person knows what they're looking at, right? And so, it really depends on where you're at in that in that journey. Then we have some customers that have already explored some of those things and they're still not maximizing the value. More times than not, it's either a change management issue, or it may be IT trying to build a solution for what they think is the problem, and there's some miscommunication between them and manufacturing. We've seen that. So we've seen, like, where do you start? Well, you have to figure out, where is the customer at, along that whole journey, right? And then you can go from there. But I hope that answers the question, because it's a really broad answer.
Yeah, it's a broad question too. I mean, it's a multi-layered question. You mentioned tech stacks, and of course, the whole crux of this conversation is about getting value out of your process data. And just to interject a bit about Canary, I mean, all of these products are about getting value out of Canary, or out of your data. And we try to make it really, really easy for folks to use their process data. So I'd like to talk about the evolution in tech stacks. Of course, we already covered, some of the tectonic labor market shifts. And then of course, there's there's disruptive technologies. And then there's also some technologies that probably are not going to be disruptive. But I'd like to get your thought on the evolution of that, just because at Canary, the way that we've seen forward is to be, highly secure, open, adaptable, to where you can, we play well with others. You can use Canary, wherever in your tech ecosystem and tech stack. Do you see any shifts there, from older patterns that have been established, among legacy systems? What do you see on the forefront? And this could get kind of broad, because of course, we can cover a few specifics: Snowflake, data warehouses, historians. But do you want to dive into a bit of that?
Yeah, I think openness, which is an approach you guys have taken, which is something we very much appreciated. Matter of fact, Ben Still, who works for me, who's my VP, he's been with me the longest, over 6 years now. He very much appreciates the open tech stack, and I don't have to buy a license to get this or to do that. And I think that generation has kind of come up that way, right? Whereas my gen and the boomer generation, right? I'm Gen X. We came up with, proprietary control systems, proprietary protocols for communication, proprietary historians. Like, we're just used to that, right? The generations that are coming up are saying that's not good enough. That's not good. You're locking me into and keeping me prisoner and extracting money. Like, I feel like your hand's in my back pocket every time I want to do anything with your stuff. And I think that, I mean, I especially see that in the process industries. Like, I've heard that about certain process vendors, that it's like they feel kind of caged. It's like, if you want to get anything out of this system, like, you got to go pay them a license fee to do anything. And I think we're seeing some tectonic shifts in that. And I think some companies are really going to have to adapt to that, and it's going to be hard, because the way they built their business model. And I think, and even for me, right, I'm running a company that I plan on, I mean, I'm not looking to sell to some big company or something. I'm not building a unicorn. I'm building something that I want to be able to sell to my employees. Well, that means that everybody, and not everybody who has ever worked for me is younger than me, but most of them have been. Those are the folks that are going to inherit this. And the reality is that's what they're demanding. So if I'm always just focusing us on these old legacy proprietary things, I'm doing them a disservice, because that's not the way the market is going. And so I think these are massive shifts. I mean, we even see, I even, like, I'm kind of out of the automation space, but this whole idea of open automation is still around. Like, I don't want to be locked into Siemens or Rockwell or Emerson or, whoever else, right? I want it more open, and it makes my life as the engineer easier. And as we bring new talent in, I don't have to train them on this proprietary system and proprietary set of protocols that have unique things about them, right? And so I see that as a massive shift that we'll continue to see. That's not going away.
I think that's cool. And I'd agree with you. I think the expectation, especially among younger folks, is is that these platforms are interoperable, that you can get your data into them for free, get it out for free. At least that's the way that we license Canary. You can bring the data in, without any license, and then you can get it out with its context completely for free. That's been a game changer in a lot of circumstances. But I also think
100%.
it's in alignment with the expectations of, these true digital natives. And that's just a difference between, generations in the labor force. But there's so many tools out there. There's open source tools. People are wanting to plug things into different places.
Yeah.
And I think they, just expect the democratization of data because it's your factory, it's your equipment, it's your human resources, and the data belongs to you. And so there's some differences there that we've tried to adapt to in terms of licensing, or I would say not adapt, but I think we've been ahead of it.
You have. Yeah, I think Ignition was kind of that way too, right? They really changed the game, in the HMI SCADA space. I mean, I've never worked with that system, but I've followed them for a number of years. I think I probably first heard about them maybe when I was at OSIsoft, maybe in 2013, 14. I had a couple of customers who were using that or considering it. They really kind of changed some of that game, right?
Yeah.
And they have grown substantially,
absolutely,
since then, right? And there are their critics too, because I think we have to be cautious, because sometimes if you make something completely open source, then you have to write your own code to go get it,
sure,
or to go do any like basic functions. Like I had a customer that I used to call on when I was at OSIsoft. They decided after I left, and I won't get into the story of why, but they decided they wanted to build their own data infrastructure in AWS.
Yeah.
Well, they had to write their own interfaces to get data out of the control system. They had to write their own, algorithms to store the data and retrieve the data, right? They had to build an an HMI type platform, right? They had to build everything.
Yeah.
I think they're rethinking that decision. I've been hearing some rumblings from some different people that they're kind of rethinking that, because you have to have a huge team of people that can support that. And we don't see that very often anymore. There's a couple companies we've heard that kind of still roll their own, in this space. I think there's got to be a blend of kind of like what you guys are doing. Like, look, we're gonna give you some repository, some basic tools to contextualize the data, to do calculations, to visualize the data. That's not everything that people are going to want to do with it, right? But you give them the ability to go get it. Like, I want to build some custom application. Like Axiom doesn't get everything. I want to build something that does this. Well, if they're like, hey, I'm really good with React JavaScript, I can go build an application that goes and retrieves the data, and they don't have to pay extra for it, and away they go. I don't know that I take that approach with everything, right? I think there's going to be this blend of, low code, no code kind of a platform in a lot of cases that give you some basic functionality, with that open source of, if I need to build something custom on top of that, I can do that easily. I think that's going to be the way, the market goes. And that has not typically been
the way it's
a lot
gone.
of the players. Yeah. I mean, you look at some of the business models out there, OSIsoft never had that business model, and Aviva certainly doesn't. AspenTech didn't really have that business model. The guys over at Capstone with Data Park and Parkview, they were closer to what you guys were in a lot of ways, and in some ways they weren't. So there's been a lot of different approaches, and I see who's growing, and I see where customers are getting frustrated.
Absolutely. And and there's, I've said this before, but depending on your use case and the specific problems that you're trying to solve, Canary might be the right fit, or if you're trying to do something else, another tool might be the right fit. But I think it's cool, what, like to your point earlier, what Ignition has done, the way that they've licensed and the way they've brought their product to market, it's very modular, and it's flexible. And I think that's interesting. And then with Canary, it's like, it's a, data infrastructure platform in the sense that you can get your data in. We've got, collectors, and then really high performance historian, which is really the backbone is the proprietary NoSQL time series historian.
Mm-hmm.
And then out of that, it enables you to get your data in really quick and then get it out extremely quickly without any lossless compression or with lossless compression. But then also the contextualization tools, visualization, but also we're not a heavy analytics engine. So we enable folks, through our web and .NET APIs, you can get the data out for free into whatever third-party tool you want. So Power BI, Seek, any other tool. And I think that's something that's in demand.
Well, and I think, your old buddy Jeff Nepper over there at Flow, you guys play nicely with their stuff too, right? So if someone now wants to take Canary data and merge it with ERP data and merge it with lab data or MES data, and then build an asset model off of that, they can go do that, right? There's a situation, too, where you can marry up the right tool for the right capability. Like if you outgrow what you guys can do from the analytics and asset-based, hierarchy type views, you have other options that you guys play nicely with, and you're not going to charge someone double the price because they want to go use something else. You're like, hey, look, yeah, we play nicely with them. Go do that. Then you've endeared yourself more to them. They're going to find ways to bring you stuff. And that's kind of the way we try to approach things too, is I try to make things easy on people, right? That's why sometimes like that ambiguity, like they breathe a sigh of relief that you're going to take that on and take it off of my plate, and therefore I'm going to bring more things to you. And one of the other like unique approaches that I think we bring too is we will train, our customers, and this kind of comes back, I'm going to tie this back together what I was just saying. One of the things we will do is we will train our customers everything that we know. Like I have no problem with any of us sharing any of our knowledge. We are not going to hold it. Now we charge for training, right? Or we do it as we're doing a project, right? But we very much believe in democratizing our knowledge, because I tell our customers all the time, you will never be as good as we are. We have a head start on you, 1. 2, this is all we do every day.
Yeah.
You have a plant to run. You're only going to have so much time to spend on this. By all means, we're going to work ourselves out of certain jobs, because you're going to go do kind of some of the simple things because we've taught you how. But then you're going to ask us to do more complex things. So you guys kind of take that same approach in that I want to make your life easy. So therefore, more people come back to you and say, how can I do more with you? Like this has been very valuable. Like we recommended your system to a company many years ago. They've put it in everywhere. They've loved it. And, I know they've sung your praises. I'm sure they've been a referenceable customer for you. And they've like stuck Flow on top of it to do some things that they wanted to do. So, and I think you guys made that intro, right? So they keep coming back to you like, how can you help us more?
Yeah.
Right. And I think that's the approach I think all of us need to take. So instead of
absolutely,
nope, I'm gonna make you pay for licenses, or I'm gonna hold all the knowledge I have and not tell you about it so that you have to call me.
Yeah.
That's not an approach that in 2024 is going to work.
Yeah, and those are the kind of conversations I don't think anybody has a good feeling as they're going to partner with a company or a vendor or an integrator and saying, am I going to be tied to this for 20 years? What is the relationship like? I need a solution, but I've also got to evaluate, what is this relationship going to be like? And I think if you could, put it all in a nutshell, it would be people are looking for strategic growth partners, not partnerships that are going to leave them with technical debt, or absorb time and resources. So I think that's probably,
we have enough technical debt out there now. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, and you'll have even exponentially more because the rate of progression, amongst technology is so quick. It's quicker than ever. So the technical debt accrues even faster. I want to get your opinion on some technologies, and before I do that, we're getting near to the end of the hour, which has really, really flown by. So I want to invite our audience. If you have questions that you'd like to ask, me about Canary, Jim about the industry and his work and his company, then feel free to drop them in the chat right now. There's a good chance we will probably not address all of them, But we would still like to engage with you after this webinar concludes. So if you have a question, please feel free to drop it. We'll try to address as many as we can. We're just going to take a few minutes at the end. But before we do that, Jim, can you touch briefly on just these different technologies that are coming out? I want to know, what do you perceive? This is just a matter of opinion or a hot take, but what do you think is going to be a game changer? And then what are some really worthwhile topics that you would recommend, that you're looking at that are interesting to you? So I mentioned, of course, historians, Snowflake, warehouses, unified namespace, which is, those are all really, really broad topics. I just, in rapid fire, What do you think? Do you have any thoughts?
I have a hot take that's not necessarily on what I think is going to help, but I'd probably go against the grain on generative AI. And I'd like to address that. Everybody's talking about it right now, just like 5 years ago, everybody was talking about IIoT, right?
Mm-hmm.
Generative AI is not going to be the panacea that everyone thinks.
Mm-hmm. And this is specifically in terms of analytics, probably.
Yeah, in the manufacturing environment.
Sure.
Okay. Are there places it's going to help you? 100%. Okay. 100%. I see somebody clapping. That's funny. The biggest problem that I see is most companies don't have the data quality to deal with it. They won't deal with their underlying data quality issues. You put a great AI tool and great code on top of crappy data, you're going to get a crappy result. If you don't address that, that's a problem. More times than not, what we're finding is customers are throwing some advanced analytic tool at first principle problems. Like if you would do some basic calculations in analytics and display that in front of the right people at the right time, you would solve 90% of your problems.
Sure.
And instead, you're throwing AI at it thinking that's going to paint the whole solution and it's going to figure out all those problems. It's just not that easy.
Yeah.
So that's a hot take, and I go very much against the grain. Now, if you have good quality data, there are, definitely some applications. We ran a cross company last year called AI Op. Those guys were doing some really neat things with some machine learning and deep learning models. And in the process space, I was very skeptical when I met them, but they were both controls guys. They had very good ideas. They were targeting very specific things, and I'm like, that's got legs, right? Those kind of technologies are going to be disruptive, right?
Yeah.
And the way they were approaching it was very different, than the traditional, like, oh, we have this neural net we're going to plug in, and we plug it into the DCS. The first time it burps, the operator unplugs it, and you paid $100,000 or $1 million for this thing that now is unplugged and it never works again.
Yeah.
So I think little things like that are going to be, highly disruptive, right? I just think you have to really focus on what you're trying to solve and make sure that your data quality is big. I think some of these self-serve analytics tools, like you mentioned Seek, right? Some of the things I've seen them do, because I was skeptical about that tool too, to be, perfectly fair, and even though almost all of my peers, it seemed like, over at OSIsoft went over there, right? I'm like, well, you guys must see something I don't. And I'm still very skeptical, but I looked at them again last year, and, the thing I liked is that they've democratized that ability to go explore. I want to try this algorithm, and I can look at things visually and put things together in a way that's more visual than us sitting down writing code for it. Because that's what I was seeing a lot of times was, oh, well, you've got to go to R, or you've got to, write something in Python. People weren't necessarily up for it, and they made it very visual. I see things like that being very disruptive.
Okay.
So I don't know. I'm trying to think of anything else, like some of the things you guys are doing, like keeping things very open source, is going to be a big deal. So I see some questions are rolling in.
Yeah, we'll address some of these questions. Yeah, I agree. I heard an interesting remark. Jensen Huang was saying that, with the advent of AI, it enables a lot more people in your company to become technologists, which I think will be cool. But like you said, it's not the panacea, the instant solution that folks may think that it is. So let me come on to one of these questions. So from Francisco, how do you see machine model digital twin value in manufacturing, specifically the amount of data gathered that needs to be done?
So interesting. I was talking digital twin with another customer in the paper industry the other day, and I said, well, how do you define it? Everybody defines digital twin a little differently. I remember Element Analytics wrote a blog post one time about it, and they had like 3 different types, right? We could certainly call, the asset model you guys build, Pi asset framework, things like that. That could certainly be called a digital twin. It's not really what I think of. I think of digital twin as truly a digital replica of what it is you're running with full simulation. And literally, this isn't a piece of equipment that would behave. So if I want to turn this knob, literally the process should react appropriately, right? I want to run a trial on a virtual paper machine. Can we do it, right? That to me is a digital twin. I don't see that today. Like, I would see great value in that. I just don't see it.
Sure.
And I remember GE, it was so funny. GE predicts. I threw shade on that tool a lot early on. Okay. I remember watching one of their presentations because everybody was talking about, oh, this is going to be the next thing, right? And this guy was on stage, and it was some power plant, like a turbine or something like that. And he's like, Twin, tell me about this. Well, there was a time that old Twin got ahead of him and was answering questions he hadn't asked yet.
Nice.
I literally said, this is vaporware.
Yeah.
This is a great idea.
Yeah.
But this is vaporware. They're showing it like they have it. And then a couple years later, kind of comes out, the only people they've been selling it to is themselves. Because I was literally like, they've done all this, all this sales with who? Because I never see it. And so digital twin, like, to me, that's what digital twin is. Is it valuable? Yes. Now let's get back to some of the other pieces. Now, what this guy in the paper industry's, definition was more of the asset model and the calculations and all that. 100% super valuable. Okay, 100% even way more valuable if you can figure out how to simulate it and where it's really a truly digital replica, where you can literally twist the knobs and say, well, what if I do this? What if I do that? I haven't seen it to that level yet. So, but yes, I think it is valuable in almost any form.
Yeah.
You just have to know what you're going to do with it and what are your expectations.
Sure. Yeah. I think just having that purpose beforehand rather than going into it and being like, I've got a twin, what is and what do I do? But yeah, having that specific purpose. I'll address one of these here. So there's a question about how we differ from Ignition SCADA. So just very quickly, Ignition is a SCADA platform that has a historian module, but Canary Labs, we are just the historian. So we also, more than that, we're a bit of a data infrastructure platform in the sense that we can collect, store, contextualize, analyze, and then publish data. But we also make a historian module for Ignition. So you can purchase your Ignition SCADA system. You can purchase their historian module, which is SQL based. And so where Canary comes in and why this makes sense is that ours is a proprietary NoSQL historian, which really tackles the scalability challenge. And then also it brings the added benefit that we've been around for 40 years next year. So we were founded in 1985. And we're in over 70 countries and used in critical infrastructure all around the world. So when that when the reliability is really, really critical for you, that's where oftentimes people will couple an Ignition SCADA system, which is fantastic, with the Canary historian module. And the module is just, it's the entirety of the Canary system tightly integrated into a module that sits right within Ignition. You can have your screens displayed within perspective. So it's really great. And then you can demo Canary for free. You can download a demo trial of Ignition, and then the module is free as well. So you can test drive the entire solution on your own.
Yeah, I was going to say something about that. Well, let me add something to that. So I remember when I worked for Rockwell Automation, they struck a deal with OSIsoft to license Pi as their factory talk historian, right? Let's talk about why. The reason why was because the old RS historian was a SQL-based historian. They would go into a big process plant that has 30,000 tags, they would get laughed out of the building. They're like, because they're like, hey, we got this great process control system. Like, okay, well, what are you doing
Yeah,
for a historian? Well, we have RS historian. They're like, that's SQL
sure.
based. It'll never scale. Like,
Yeah.
get out of here. We're not even going to consider your stuff.
Hmm.
So, SQL's fine for doing some quick things. It's not necessarily good for a big scalable data historian with good retrieval and storage.
Hmm.
So I agree with your assessment. If you're kicking the tires, like, I just want to see if like this would be valuable to me. Okay, yeah, throw that in there. But you really need to think about like, and you guys make it very easy to play with Ignition. So
Yeah.
I would lean that way. If you're thinking about it at all, I would certainly like lean that way. You guys make it very price attractive. So
Yeah, and a historian, it might not be the most flashy or exciting tool, though our Axiom visualization tool is really, really intuitive and really fantastic. But it is
100%.
really
It's great.
it's the backbone. I mean, you have to have data storage, very fast storage and retrieval. Especially if you want to do even anything at a low level, but millions of tags. It's just an essential component, even if it may not be as flashy or exciting. It's really critical. So we'd encourage you to explore more. Probably one last question, and then I'll just let you share a bit about your company. But very quickly, is there a specific point at which a customer they've got a lot of data, they've got a great SCADA system? At what point do you recommend you need a powerful analytics tool? Is there a specific threshold? Because of course you can do a ton diagnostically, maybe not predictively, but just with a historian. Is there a certain line?
Yeah, I always tell people the traditional use of a historian is two things, right? One is we want to give non-process people process graphics so that we
Yep.
don't have to give them access to our DCS or SCADA system. That's usually like use case one. Use case two is we want to trend what's going on, okay, or what's been happening. If you're at a point where, okay, you're mature in both of those, and the only thing you use your historian for is, hey, something broke, let's go look in the historian and figure it out.
Mm-hmm.
You're driving down the road looking at your rearview mirror.
Mm-hmm.
You've got to start thinking about, how do I drive looking out the windshield, which is much bigger than the little rearview mirror we're given. I think the case in point is you've extracted all the value out of process graphics and trends,
Sure.
which is a big one. Like if you have nothing, those are big.
Yeah.
Those are big.
Especially with really well-defined asset models, there's a lot there.
There is
it's not the whole pie.
Yeah, there is a ton there. So at that point, if you're mature in that, you really need to thinking about, how do I get more where I can see more, not just what has happened, but what is going on now versus what might be coming. Yeah. That's where the asset models, events, really good dashboarding with good visual design techniques, really start to come into play. Like that to me is that point where it's like, okay, we've extracted all the value out of the first use cases we put in a historian for. Now we got to take that next step.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Well, Jim, thank you so much. This time has gone by, but I think it's gone by so quickly, but there's so much value, I think, in this conversation. So this is, of course, going to be published on our YouTube channel and then presumably on yours as well. Yep. So if one of your colleagues wasn't able to make it, then feel free to share this video with them when the recording is released. And then I just put in the chat your Industrial Insight website. If you want to, excuse me, if you want to connect with Jim, of course, reach out there. Wealth of expertise, tons of knowledge, and a fantastic team. So if you're looking at a project, I would consider reaching out to Jim, certainly. And then if you want to know more about Canary, you can do so. There's the link as well, canarylabs.com. You can, of course, demo the software for free. And we're actually doing a webinar that kind of overviews what even is the Canary system in detail tomorrow at 11. So you're welcome to sign up for that. But Jim, thank you so much. Do you want to add anything else before we close about Industrial Insight?
Yeah, I would say connect with me on LinkedIn. I post, some of my musings there. Also take a look at our YouTube channel. Some of the stuff I have done in the past have either been specific to maybe the PI system or specific to Simca, but what you will find is, regardless of industry, regardless of platform, the techniques I show and the thought processes I bring apply. Right. Yeah. So the reasoning for doing certain things, I try to explain that, because realistically, and like I tell customers, often cases the platform doesn't necessarily matter. The approach and how you use that platform to solve the actual problems you have are important. So YouTube, and like I mentioned earlier, the conversation I had with Lance, from a digital transformation, if you're like more of the business user, or like send it to your business people, right? Like go listen to this guy. Like this guy's been there, right? So those kind of conversations I try to have, over there too. And that's a great place to kind of learn who I am, how I think, and what our company is about, because I've shown off some of our people too, and some of the solutions that they've built and why. And, the thing is, a lot of those can be built in other platforms. They don't, they're not specific to the platform that we might have shown, like that. Those techniques are available in lots of places. And so that's a good place to go learn about us, but besides our website. I try to do a decent job on the website, but I've been told by my own millennials that it looks more like a boomer thing now. So, I'll have to fix that at some point, but I don't think it looks that bad.
Hey, I think it's a great website. So check it out, industrialinsight.com, industrialinsightinc.com. And really the value is that, a dozen industries and industry verticals and a dozen technologies in tremendous detail, but also you're able to apply these universally applicable approaches and perspectives on how to get projects done to a broad range of technologies, whether it's Canary or something else. So that's why we wanted to have this webinar. We wanted to bring you on and really talk about the title there, turning data into action and making discovering industrial insights so that you can have enhanced productivity. So Jim, thanks again a ton. Again, Jim is the founder and the president of Industrial Insights. And my name is Clark Bosser with Canary Labs, Director of Business Development here. So if you want to learn more, reach out to us. And thank you very much for joining.
Absolutely. And don't forget my other title, Chief Time Series Data Storyteller. So
yes, absolutely.
It's actually, it's kind of started a little bit as a joke, but it fits. Hopefully you saw some of that today. Yeah. Because I do like to tell stories.
If you want more time series bedtime stories, then Jim's got a YouTube channel with a ton of great things on it. So check him out there.
Appreciate y'all. Thanks for coming.
Awesome. Thank you, Jim.
Yep.